Okay, I think we'll make a start. Thanks everyone for attending our webinar today. We are Jigsaw24, and we are going to be. I'm going to be introducing you to some international educators from all around the world. That it is an absolute pleasure to actually have them on this call. So thank you all for joining the webinar, and I hope by the end of the session today that you're gonna go away with some ideas on what our speakers are going to be talking to you about and the questions I'm going to lead them through. So I'm just going to introduce our team at Jigsaw. We've got myself as Richard Poth. I'm a trainer at Jigsaw. We've also got Megan Brown and Terry Coombs and Paul Tullock, who are the trainers at Jigsaw. We are working with many schools around the country, supporting the teaching and learning of using specifically iPads within the classroom to support the teaching and learning that's going on in the school. So let me now introduce our speakers that we've got today. And some really fantastic educators that we've got in the room today, and a wealth of experience, and particularly with what's been happening in the world at the moment, and obviously with the pandemic and how hybrid learning and remote learning has been happening. These guys have got so much experience and so many ideas of what they've been doing in the countries that they've been working in. So let me introduce you to, first of all, Craig Kemp. Now, you may have heard of Craig if you're following on Twitter. Craig has got a massive following on Twitter, and he's a very well-renowned keynote speaker, and I've seen Craig speak on so many different occasions on so many different subjects, and he has a massive wealth of experience. He's a consultant at the moment, a global education consultant. He's worked in many international schools. The most recent was Stanford International School in Singapore, Stanford American International School in Singapore, where he was the director of learning. I've got that right. So Craig will be with us today answering some questions, so a wealth of experience there. Then we've got Claire Waller. Now, Claire, again, has done some fantastic work at the school that she's been working in. I've known Claire since 2011, I believe, when I was working at the same school as Claire at Nexus International School in Malaysia. And Claire is now the head of the primary department, and she has a real passion for wanting to use technology within the classroom and supporting the teaching and learning in really creative ways. In fact, recently she's done she did a Zoom webinar with students all around the world, and my 6-year-old daughter was actually part of that. It was such an inspiring session for my daughter, particularly, to actually experience what other children around the world are actually doing. And I know Claire is about to she's going to do another webinar very similar to that in the next month or so. Then we've got Phill Cristofaro. Now, Phill is a really very good friend of mine. I met Phill several years ago via the Apple route, using the ADE route. And Phill has got a wealth of experience as an education consultant. He's also an Apple professional learning specialist as well, from the Australian end. And he's done so many creative things with the students. I know that Phill, for example, he published an Apple book with his students a couple of years ago, which was all about World War II. The things that he's been doing with the iPad within the classroom is really incredible. So I'm welcome to Phill as one of the speakers in the session today. And finally, we've got Megan. Megan and I have known each other for about five or 6 years now. I worked with Megan in South Korea. Megan is a absolutely inspiring primary school teacher, particularly with technology. And I know she's working in Hong Kong at the moment as a class teacher. And Megan has an incredible wealth of experience, particularly with how hybrid learning is worked in Hong Kong. So there's so much that I know that Megan, and we've had mounting conversations on how hybrid learning has worked, and we had a conversation a few days ago about exactly this. So that's our panel today. So welcome everyone. So thank you so much for joining us. it's going to be a discussion, and I want to actually build this discussion as, you know, so people that are watching can really take something away. So the first question I'm going to ask you is this. How has the pandemic, and I'm going to put this firstly, if you don't mind, Claire, I'm going to put this to you as the primary head of Nexus. How has the pandemic affected the way that you're able to ensure that teachers and students continue to learn? And what have you done to tackle the problem?
Okay, thanks, Richard. Hi, everybody. So maybe if I just give you a very brief overview of our journey, and I've got to emphasize it's still a journey. I'm sure Megan in Hong Kong probably agrees with me. So we're not the experts, we're still learning, but I'm happy to share. So we went into our lockdown in March last year, and it was quite sudden. Even though we'd been seeing what was happening in China and Hong Kong, it was still quite a shock to us. So we all needed to adjust, because I think it was shocking for the whole world, wasn't it? And we needed to look after our teachers. So we started week one, a lighter lesson content for the children. We just had a live check-in in the morning via Google Meet, just a live registration, explained the instructions for the day, had a daily menu to make it clear to the children what they needed to work on and learn, posted our work on Seesaw and Google Classroom, and the children kind of got on with it. After week one, we really reviewed what was going on, and we got feedback, and this was so important, from the parents, from the teachers, and from the learners as well, because the parents' voice was so important, because we really needed them to be involved in primary and keep those relationships positive. So feedback was, to keep learning going, you need to be a bit more rigorous. We need to make it more of a kind of proper timetable, a structure, whilst also balancing well-being, because the children can't manage that full amount of content. We need to be realistic about that. But then we started with a more live input. So the teachers, instead of, they'd originally posted videos of themselves, which they used Photo Booth, iMovie, Screencastify. Week two, they went to a live model where they gave a live input. This made children much more accountable. And we reopened school. We went to a more of a hybrid model for those children stranded abroad, where teachers kind of trial what would work. How do I teach in the classroom and also abroad, which I know we're going to explore in a bit more depth a bit later on. But I think in a nutshell, how we really ensured everyone kept learning was to constantly adapt, constantly get feedback. And even though we'd looked at other countries, we looked at what worked for us, and we developed from there. We looked after teachers' well-being, because I think through doing that enabled innovation with teachers. And you know, a few weeks in, the teachers were doing the virtual school trips, they were being creative, and they had kind of room to breathe and create with it. So that became much more successful and motivated the children more, which was really important.
Oh, fantastic, Claire. Thank you so much. Can I ask Megan, because obviously you've got a very similar experience in terms of you being actually in a school at the moment. So can you maybe just give a brief summary of maybe your journey, and then maybe tell us how you've ensured that teachers and students continue to learn?
So our journey is a little bit different than Claire's. We actually were, it was over Chinese New Year last year that we were told by the government that the schools would be closing for 2 weeks after Chinese New Year. So starting February 4th of 2020, we would be going virtual. And we did have the protests in Hong Kong in the fall of 2019. So we had already had our schools closed for a number of days. So we had a trial of what it looked like to be virtual. And so we hit the ground running. And we met as a team, and we decided, okay, you know what, we want these kids to be engaged right away. We started right away with using Zoom and having the kids, like Claire was saying, like do morning check-ins. We were doing videos, because at that point we didn't really know how long it would last. We were thinking, oh, 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks became 2 more weeks, and then we had we were basically virtual until the last 3 weeks of school last year. And then over the summer, we became virtual again. And then we had about a good 2 months, and now we are every other day. So our schedule has changed a lot, but we did, like Claire said, we started with having the kids watching videos, and then we would be doing small group work with the kids. So I would have you know, a handful of my kids meet throughout the day on Zoom, and then we would meet as a class in the morning and in the afternoon. And at that point in time, because it was over our Chinese New Year, our kids were literally all over the world. They had scattered and they were on vacation. And so some of them didn't come back until the summer. And so it was definitely an interesting experience for us. But once the kids started to come back, it was a little bit easier because they had their own devices. Our school is one-to-one with iPads. And so a lot of the kids didn't have access to their iPads last year until they came back the last 3 weeks of school. The one thing that our school changed, which was a huge, huge thing, was that when we went virtual this summer, we started the year with every student having their iPad. And that made a huge difference because we were able to ensure that they had the right apps on it before they were handed over to them. They had access to their email, their Google Classroom, they had access to Zoom, they had access to anything. And a lot of our kids have also developed as technology users. Many of my students, I will see them working on their iPads, but then they'll also have their screen up as well, like their regular laptop or their computer at home. And so they've become 2 device users as well, just like some of us are. And so I think that the teachers have grown as technology users. I think that one of the biggest game changers to ensure that the kids are being engaged in their learning and continuing to learn is having expectations and reinforcing those expectations. One of the things that our school has said as a school that the expectation is that cameras are turned on. And so when the cameras are turned on, I know that there are a lot of schools that is not the case. But when the cameras are turned on, you really can tell if the students are engaging. In fact, today, I was in the middle of my math lesson and I was talking to one of the kids and he said something and it was very off topic. And I looked at his screen a little closer and I was like, you can put the Rubik's Cube away. And he was like, oh. And so like when they have the screens on, they know that we're watching. And, you know, just like you would in a normal classroom, you'd walk by and kind of pick up the Rubik's Cube and set it aside. You know, you just want to make sure that we're holding the students accountable and having the continued open communication with families has been so important as well.
Fantastic, Megan. I think there's a lot that, and I know Claire, you're one-to-one as well at the school as well, particularly because obviously I've worked at the school. So I think that one-to-one aspect is key, isn't it? Is key for having the students having that access to learning anywhere. Let me put a similar question then to obviously Craig and Phill, because you're looking at it from, I mean, I know Phill, you're working in a school and you've done the consultancy stuff as well, but let's come to Craig first. Craig, you've been working in so many different schools. What have you seen in terms of this?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Richard, because, you know, my work now that I'm not in the silo that I like to refer to now of a school, you know, I get to see the way it works and successes and multiple failures in so many schools globally, particularly here in Asia. And, you know, one of the things that we've done with Ignite is go into schools, support them in this journey from, you know, as both Megan and Claire shared, you know, thrown in the deep end, really was thrown in the deep end and having to survive all the way through it. And we're in the position now where I think it's exciting because we can somewhat see the light. So people are starting to just get to that stage of how do we move from the surviving to the thriving? So how do we actually get to developing the strategy around how we can be successful now and into the future. So one of the things that we've been challenging schools with is, and you hear this all the time, you know, Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So when we're going into schools, I'm saying to them, you know, have you talked to your people about what went well, what didn't go so well, and why it was successful or not successful? And unfortunately, you know, one of the things that I've seen as being the biggest downside is that schools have actually taken away the professional learning process and cycle, and they've said, oh, it's actually too hard. And I think, unfortunately, when we talk about learners, we have to talk about our teachers and our leaders and our parents. And we often forget about them as learners in our school. And that means time. Give people more time to learn, give people more time to play and explore. You know, we're in one of the most transformational times in human history. And we're in the middle of a pandemic where we've been forced to do something we didn't ever think we were going to have to do. Is there a better time to actually try new things, make mistakes? We encourage that of our kids all the time, but often we don't do it ourselves. So, you know, one of the things that I have really enjoyed seeing across multiple schools is seeing people willing to continue that learning, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, providing teachers with time to play, learn, develop, and grow, because I think that's a really critical skill set to develop that strategy, but that sustainable approach to learning over time.
Craig, that's fantastic. And you know, I absolutely get your point there with the professional learning for teachers. I think it's absolutely key that that we do. And you know, and as part of Ignite, that's obviously what you are doing a lot of. We as a team at Jigsaw, we are now doing this. We are constantly doing this and making sure that we're working with the teachers to ensure that the teachers are upskilled enough to be able to do this, to tackle these issues. Thanks so much, Craig. Phill, you've got kind of two perspectives here. You've got looking at it from being in a school and as a consultant working with lots of schools. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Hello, everybody. Probably the first thing that comes to mind is that one of my favourite quotes, William Gibson famously said that the future's already here, it's just not very evenly distributed. I think that's a truism. The other thing is that innovation, there's no better way to get innovation other than through necessity, and we've all been forced into a bit of a corner with this. A bit like Craig and also Claire and Megan, I've worked with a school directly, worked as a part-time staff member and supported a learning community, but also supported a bunch of other schools in the same way. And I think having a one-to-one in Australia, one-to-one's very common. For some schools, it was a case of, well, the devices don't go home. Well, actually, they do now. You know, we have to change the way we think about who owns the device, who owns the learning. The other thing is that in the school I work at part-time, it's a bring your own device program. So that concept of having the device at home was ready to go. I think having infrastructure was really, really important. And obviously the synchronous and asynchronous things are covered through various tools. My personal favorite thing I saw it have a huge impact with Shobi, just because of that, the ability for students and teachers to be able to maintain a really powerful relationship, an ongoing relationship through the use of voice and voice recordings and things like that. So continuing the learning, you know, I think what Claire and Megan said earlier about teachers, you know, having check-in sessions and videos, I mean, I think that ended up being a common experience across the board. Whether schools had a focus, I think most schools that I worked with had a focus on well-being and put a real spotlight on creativity, that make and create. I think that was really, really important. And I think, you know, Melbourne was unique in Australia in that we had that really long lockdown. We had COVID got out of hotel quarantine, and we ended up being in lockdown from the end of term 1 in March right through till the beginning of term 4. So we were in lockdown for 6 months, and it was a serious lockdown. The Victorian government ended up ferrying a whole bunch of devices out to schools and said to those family, schools, dish them out to families, send whatever you've got home. And they've actually turned around and said to those families, we don't want the devices back. We want you to keep them because we don't know when this sort of thing is going to happen again. So I think, the rethink that Craig talks about is happening at every level of the system, and as it needs to be responsive. I think the bigger question now in front of us is, what are we going to do with all this newfound perspective and these insights that we have? We have to do better for how we look towards education going forwards. Yeah.
Great, Phill, that's fantastic. And I think you're absolutely right. And that is certainly a question that we need to pose. What's next? And we will come on to that afterwards, actually. But I want to kind of pick up on, we're in the panel here, we love technology. We know about technology. We can understand it. But what about our teachers that do maybe have a few barriers there, that they a bit of worries? How have you dealt with those kind of teachers to show them about hybrid learning, to show them about remote learning? How can we get these teachers? How have you been getting these teachers to be more creative in the way that they can deliver the hybrid or the remote learning approach? Claire, can we go to you first with that?
Yeah, so we'd mentioned professional learning, Richard, and we put professional learning on hold for just a few weeks and just focused on, we're still professional learning, but only on what you need to know to support you for this new role now. And then we kind of constantly adapted and looked at what support are we giving teachers to prepare them for this. And we kind of said to all the teachers, look, just like planning for your children, you wouldn't plan ahead for the full year, all their lessons, would you? We're planning for you. We need to look at our current situation and we need to get feedback from you. What do you need? So we had a variety of different things. We had whole school professional learning. We're very lucky, as you know, we still have an IT integrator. But because we've done lots of professional learning and skilled up the teachers and TAs, I was discovering we had teaching assistants who were meeting on Google Meets with teachers and skilling them up on whatever they might need, so that the training was very personalised. In terms of really introducing hybrid, because we were doing the hybrid model before we knew it was called that, to be honest, when we first opened and we had learners trapped abroad. And the teachers were kind of making it up a bit as they went along. What we discovered worked was the live greet in the morning to welcome everyone, then a couple of live sessions in the day, then the menu of activities to learn. We took this information. I met with the heads of other schools in Malaysia to hear what they were doing. And to be quite honest, everybody was in the same boat. They were kind of, we're not quite sure, we're feeling our way. And also what works for one school can be really different for another school, depending on size, age group. So we as a leadership team did our research into the different terminology, the different ways that you can teach hybrid, whether it's synchronous, whether it's a homework model, whether you're flipping your classroom. And we had a whole staff professional learning session with everybody. We shared that. Then we kind of put it onto our middle leaders, so kind of like our year group milepost leaders, to share what we hoped we would be able to do. And we put it onto them. We said, come up with a plan. Tell us what you can do. We're not going to say you must do it like this. You tell us, age and stage appropriate. So they came up with a kind of daily menu of what would work for them. At first they were brilliant and they got a bit carried away. They were kind of having live links all day. And we said, wait a minute, let's start off a bit lighter. Because parents understand, they want to work with us, and then we can develop it as we go along. So that was kind of where we're up to, really, that we wanted the middle leaders to take a bit of a lead as well, trial it and really work with teachers, say, right, what can you do? Because it was no good me saying, right, I want 5 live sessions a day from everybody, because some year groups we've got 3 classes, some year groups we've only got 1, so that's 1 teacher and a TA. So it was quite varied. Early years has been interesting as well. That's worked really well. So our early years teacher then took that to kind of trial a system working really close with parents, because we are open for early years, but nobody else in Malaysia. So she's got funnily enough, most parents were very happy to send all the children back into school. And she just had a small group still at home where parents were worried. So again, they joined the morning greet. Then after feedback with parents, very much input from parents who said, look, we are not teachers. Our children do not listen to us in the same way they listen to you at school. So we're having difficulty sticking to a timetable. So we shared a flexible timetable where we said, pick and choose how and when you want to do this. We shared really simple plans so they could understand all the terminology. But then the teacher checked in twice for a small groups phonics session, which they really enjoyed, but also just a very open feedback session. And that feedback session was a chance for parents to join in as well and share any questions. And so it kind of made everybody really connected. So kind of to summarize, it was a mixture of whole school professional learning, one-to-one drop-ins and support, and a little bit trial and error. We've also found jumping into planning sessions as well to talk to different teams has been quite effective to hear their individual challenges.
Oh, thanks, Claire. Oh, so there's been obviously there's been a massive learning journey for all of you within the school. I mean, it's really exciting to hear that kind of stuff. So, and Megan, from your point of view, you're teaching all the time with the kids. In terms of your team, then how are they reacting to this? Because obviously you're very technically minded, and how's the rest of the team of teachers that you work with how are they dealing with this?
So I actually work on a team of 10 teachers. I'm in the upper primary, so we have 10 teachers per grade level. So there's 30 teachers in our division. And when this all started, we just dove in and we all were kind of doing what worked best for us. And in a way, I think we still are, because you do have to be aware of different teachers' comfort levels when it comes to different types of technology. And so for probably the first month or so, our admin was kind of hands off. They said, you all can work together and figure out things. And so we did a lot of discussion as a team to see what was working best for us. And then I'd say probably a month or 6 weeks in, we did a PD for our whole school. So all 30 teachers got together, and there were probably 5 or 6 of us that we did individual sessions. We offered individual sessions on things that were kind of working well for us. There were some teachers that were showing how to give feedback. They would be giving video. They would do like a little video feedback for their kids. I did one on doing multiple screens, so using both your iPad and your laptop when you are on Zoom, and so signing into both places, and then you're able to see the students and interact with the students, but then you can also share your screen at the same time. That piece was actually a big eye opener for a lot of our staff. They were like, you can sign in on 2 devices. And so yes, if you have 2 devices, do it. It is a game changer. And so that's definitely, that has been really helpful. But I think that we have offered kind of mini sessions throughout this whole thing of what has worked and what hasn't worked. And we've really been able to help each other develop different skills. And because our schedule has had so many changes throughout the last 13 months, like I said, we were doing video, we were doing like little meetings in the morning, and then we would do all of our lessons in the video, and then we would have small groups. Now the majority of our students are back in Hong Kong. And so when it comes to our hybrid learning, what our hybrid learning looks like is a little different, because our current schedule is 1 day in school, 1 day on Zoom, 1 day in school, 1 day on Zoom. And so that is a different type of hybrid learning than when you have some of the kids in the classroom and some of the kids out of the classroom. We didn't have too much of that because we were virtual for so long in the beginning. Now when our kids are coming in, it is the majority of our class that is in. I only have one student that's not here. And our school has actually, because there's so few students that are out of the country, and there's a lot with the government and the quarantine. We have a 21-day quarantine, and so when the parents are leaving, it's been interesting because even when they come back, they're still in like a 3-week quarantine. So our school has actually asked to limit travel because most people are limiting travel in general. And so we don't have too many kids that are learning outside of school when their classmates are in school. But with our hybrid learning, what happens is I'll front load lessons in person. And then when it comes to the Zoom lessons later, then that might be when they are, doing small group discussions in breakout rooms. That might be some of their independent work time when I can do some small group one-on-one teaching. So it looks a little bit different every single day, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many schools that we're working with that there is such different things going on within schools, and actually on that note, Craig and Phill as the consultant and as APLS we do it here. We're doing a lot of coaching with teachers. I just wondered on a similar kind of question, how you work with different teachers. What kind of ways are you getting the teachers to be more creative in the way they may deliver remote learning and hybrid learning? Craig, we go to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think, you mentioned APLS and Apple devices. It makes life so easy to create and make. That whole idea of how do you move from consumption to creation, and the ability to not just consume, but actually create content that allows our learners to think, create, make it, and maybe even invent, and relate that back to the SAMR model and what Ruben Putindera says. It's all about how can we be transformative about the learning experiences we provide our kids, and not just put them in a position where they get to consume content and then verbally give us or vomit up replies to that. The old favorite when I was about 10, 15 years ago when I was working in public schools back in New Zealand was, let's get the kids making PowerPoints and slideshows to show their learning. And, when I look back at that now, I think, and by the way, I still see people in schools doing that. But when I look at it now, I think, is that really transformative? Am I doing anything, other than substituting what I could have done without technology? And I think the question always needs to be, in any planning session, in any delivery session, is, can I do this without technology? And if the answer is yes, then don't use technology. What's the point in putting technology in if it's not going to change and redefine learning in some way, shape, or form? And, Alvin Toffler says, and as I think about this whole learning piece, he says, the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And for me, that learning, unlearning, and relearning is that position we're in right now. And it's the same for our kids, and it's the same for our parents. We're not isolated from that fact. Yeah, it's difficult for us, but our kids are in that same position. So we have to be able to allow them those opportunities. I think, like Claire and Megan said, give them choices, allow them to pick and choose when and how they do things, front load them as much as possible, and then allow them to make and create solutions to problems just like they would in the real world, just like we do in the real world to solve problems.
Fantastic, Craig. Thanks very much. Phill, is there anything you'd like to add there? Because obviously you've had this experience with working with lots and lots of teachers in terms of, and I know as working with you myself, you're an extremely creative teacher. So what kind of things are you doing with the teachers to really enhance this creativity? And like Craig says, not using technology for the sake of using technology.
Yeah, it's a great question too. I think part of the answer comes in the form of quick wins sometimes. So some of the times I think you need to, I would either run a session for kids live and show them something that creative or interesting that they could do, particularly with their iPads. Then at other times, depending on if it was more a sustained piece, trying to connect some really engaging content and then using digital tools to capture learning. So there's a wonderful anyone who's out there listening. If you just Google Beyond the Map, it's a Google experience of where you follow basically someone on a camera into the favelas in Brazil. No, what's it? Where is it? The favelas. I've forgotten the name of the city where it is. But you follow this camera in, and you basically explore all these people that live there in a 365-degree world. So we created a workbook that encouraged students to go in and explore and then capture elements of that. And then you hand that to teachers and you say, go away and make something with it. I think the other important thing is to really value, think of a classroom as such a rich resource of a learning, as a learning community, and actually utilize the creativity of students and get them making tutorials and showing other kids how they create things and making the learning really sticky. I think that one of the hardest things for teachers is that they, this constant need to be creative and innovative all the time. And, I've got to be doing this or what's the saying? Paralysis by analysis. You end up doing not very much at all because you are completely overwhelmed by the plethora of stuff that's in front of you. So don't try and do it all. Get kids to do it for you. Get kids to show other kids and be the enabler. Sometimes I think is really effective. Yeah.
Can I add on to what you were just saying, Phill, about enabling the students? I think that's actually so powerful. The kids in all of our classrooms in Hong Kong, well, in my school, I should say, they are very forward thinking. And so when they want to do something, they will actually just reach out to each other. And so we have on our Zoom days, we have an asynchronous time where they have some time to do work, and they don't have to work in partnerships, but I allow them to if they want to. And then I also have kind of an open time for them to come. And I never have kids come to my open time because they're always working with each other. To be quite honest, like they just actually enjoy that. They're able to problem solve. They're able to come up with some really awesome ideas. And so empowering them to work together is just such an important piece.
Is that the whole school at the same time in the school on Zoom, or are classes staggered? If staggered, how is that working for transportation from to and from school for siblings?
So that's a big question. So the government in Hong Kong has been really specific about certain certain percentage of students that are allowed on campus. One thing is that they can only stay until a certain period of time as well. So our students are actually only in school from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. when they're in school. And it's only 50% of the school. So because we have 10 classes in each grade level, we're broken down into 2 different communities per grade level. So we have 15 classes on campus. So half of 3rd grade, half of 4th grade, half of 5th grade are in school each day. And then the other half, are in school every other day. And then the other half of the school is on Zoom. And then we switch to next day. So we have a 6-day rotation. So right now my students are on Zoom on days 1, 3, and 5. And then on days 2, 4, and 6, they're in person. For transportation, the buses are generally stopping at the same stops. The transportation side, I don't work a whole lot with, so I don't know the details of that, but I do know it's generally the same routes. For siblings, the fact that our school is so big, we also have a lower primary on our campus as well. That is also staggering every other day too. So you kind of multiply the amount of students that you're transporting and everything. It just wasn't possible for siblings to go back and forth, or for families to say like, all of these kids are going to be on days 2, 4, 6. All of these are going to be 1, 3, 5. And so Hong Kong is probably an exception around the world, that most of our families do have helpers. And so the kids are not being left at home alone. They do have somebody there that is supporting them in one way or another. But this is probably our, I would say, 7th or 8th schedule this year. So starting just in August, this is like the 7th or 8th schedule that we've had. And I was just telling the panel before we got on, about an hour ago, I got an email saying that we have another schedule starting on Monday because the government said now we can have a little bit more classes on, and now it's 9 classes at a time. And then every 10 days, there's only going to be, like my class will be on Zoom once every 10 days. So the biggest thing I think is just flexibility and communication, making sure that the students understand it, making sure the families understand it. But our families, our community has been pretty flexible. I hope that was the best way I could answer that.
No, thanks, Megan. Alex, I hope that's answered your question. Have you encountered any? Well, I mean, some of this you've already mentioned, so but we can maybe give some tips and hints. Have you encountered any successes and surprises as a result of doing the hybrid and remote learning? And how? What I'm really keen on finding out is what, after this pandemic is over, those successes and surprises, how are they going to redefine the way that your schools will now educate? Let's go to Phill. Let's go to you first on that.
That's interesting. That's a good one. So I think, and Sam's put in a really good question that I think links to that, Pothy, which he's asked about if you were going to continue for another year, what would you continue doing? If remote learning was going to continue, what would changes would you make, and what would you continue? And I think that's part of your question about moving forwards. I think one of the things that you want to give agency to teams of teachers, and I think Megan and also Claire mentioned this earlier, that the idea that you allow teams to have agency over making decisions that are the best decisions based on the cohort of students, teach to the child, not necessarily to the level, and have a really team-oriented approach to sharing and building the resources that are required. That you have to put a lot of work into building quality video. It takes a long time, for example. So I did work with one school last year who insisted that every teacher had to make their own videos, and no, you couldn't share videos because it was important that the students had to only see their teacher. And these poor people were absolutely, their eyes were hanging out of their heads. And I was horrified, actually. So I think you need a common sense approach. What Claire said earlier really resonated with me, actually. It's pulling back sometimes and giving teachers and teams license and telling them that they're overdoing it and having some good, honest conversations about that. I think Sam also mentioned something about parents pushing back. What do you do about those parents? And I think the other good thing about good leadership is that the leadership needs to back the school and back the teachers, and sometimes be pushed back against some of those unrealistic parent expectations that you're going to get because people, have their own personal views about things. Yeah. You muted, Pothy.
Yeah, I know. I saw that.
You're on mute, Pothy.
I'm on mute. So, Claire, is there anything you want to add to that? I mean, where do you see in terms of Nexus that when the pandemic is over, where is this amazing stuff that the teachers are learning? How is that going to continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think loads of technology learning and continue with the sharing of best practice. I think things like remote meetings for parent-teacher conferences. Why didn't we always do that? Why did it take so long to think of that? We forced parents to drive for an hour for a 15-minute meeting and then drive an hour back again, As you mentioned before, Richard, the global summit was so easy to organise. It was a Zoom invite and I just put it out there on social media, and so many people wanted their children to connect from different countries around the world. We had Turks and Caicos, I think it was 3 a.m, and just opportunities like that. I've heard of people before the pandemic doing mystery Skype. I'd never done it before. Now we had a virtual visitor from Cadbury's in England yesterday, so just really those opportunities to connect around the world for teachers and use that kind of virtual communication will make life a lot easier, has been a big learning curve for us, I would say.
Fantastic, Claire. Yeah, there's some that idea of I've got funny enough, I've got my daughter's parent evening, parent afternoon this afternoon on a Zoom call, which is great. Don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Talk to the school. Fantastic. Yeah. Craig, anything you want to add there in terms of that?
Yeah, I think just a couple of quick points. One is, that as everyone was sharing then, the thing that came to my mind was culture eats strategy for breakfast. We can be as strategic as we want, but if we don't have the culture where people want to change, that they want to grow, and that they're willing to take these things on, then you're never going to move anywhere. And, I know Nexus really well, and both here and in Malaysia. And, they have worked so hard on this culture piece when rolling out, Apple one-to-one programs and everything in between. And that's why they're successful. Yeah, there's some really solid strategy in there as well, but that whole culture piece is something that I really value. The other thing that came up in my mind was wellness, the focus now on wellness. And if I was to do this again, I would have a huge focus on teacher well-being, but also leader well-being. Often we forget about the leaders in our buildings as well. There's so many people to think about, and often that emphasis gets put on our leaders. So how are we looking after our leaders in our buildings to make sure that they're okay as well? And companies like ClanBeat, who are a company out of Estonia, who are providing technology-based wellness solutions, particularly for students. But ClanBeat is trying to create this system or solution where they bring people together, and I'm happy to share it with anyone as well. But you can look it up. They're trying to bring people together to have that conversation around the importance of wellness. And the third thing for me is in this next phase is what would I do? I would get rid of everything else that I was planning to do, and I'd focus on making sure my teachers were okay. I'd make sure that less time is better, less is more, and let's forget about trying to be innovative right now and let's try and get through it together. That whole idea of surviving to thriving is exactly where we are now.
Thanks, Craig. So, some fabulous points there. And Megan, maybe because I think you're doing a lot at the moment that I obviously can see that will continue in the future with what you're doing. So is there anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually we're in an interesting spot right now because we're now currently teaching units that we started teaching online last year. And so we've come all the way around. And it's been interesting because we have 2 new team members, and we made these awesome videos. And now our team members have actually been able to utilize those videos to say, oh, this is how I teach this strategy for, multiplying or dividing fractions. And so the teachers are utilizing the videos as tutorials for themselves to refresh how to teach things that maybe they didn't teach in the grade level that they were teaching before. So I think that is great. So now we just have this, we have tons of videos that have been done for our last, few units of the year. I think what everyone else has said is very, very true. I think the teacher wellness is important. With our changes of schedule, we have had a little bit of flexibility when it comes to the number of meetings, and we haven't had as many meetings, which has allowed our teachers to maybe leave school a little bit earlier. We have amazing hikes here in Hong Kong, and they have been able to go and hike home and decompress with other teachers. And that, I think, has been really helpful. And having that support system around, we have people that have multiple kids to singles, and we're all facing this pandemic together and away from our families, right? Like, we haven't seen our families in over a year. And so the idea of just having that support system that has been created at school has been really, really powerful for us. But I do definitely agree with what all of the other panelists were saying as well. I mean, there's just so much that we have gotten. I think the idea of being able to connect so much more easily with people around the world. Richard and I haven't seen each other in person for 3 years now, I think 3 or 4 years.
Nearly 4.
Yeah, but we've been able to connect multiple times this year and have had great discussions and just connecting the students with other kids around the world as well.
No, absolutely, Megan. And I think, you've all touched on it. And I think it's this whole idea of support. It is so key to making this work in the future. I think if we can take that, and there's so much learning has happened in the last year as a result of this, and so much we've been forced into, but we obviously need to take those opportunities to move forward with it. So we've got a couple of minutes left, and I'd like maybe just a one sentence answer from each of you on this one, if that's okay. I'd like to ask you if you were to give the guys that are on this call and the one that would be watching the recording, if you can give them some advice or a tip or an app, what would you give? Let's go to Phill first.
I would say in one sentence that mobility trumps portability any day of the week. And so don't look to the one app, but look to how you can use the mobility of your device and get kids interacting and engaging with the real world, get them outside taking photos and really value video as a rich source of data.
Fabulous, Phill. Thanks, Claire. What's your thought?
We touched on this before, but I think our children are so creative. Give them the choice to record. It's going to make them happy and creative, and they know so much more than we do because they can explore it. It might be Minecraft education, how they record it. It might be an iMovie. It could be all sorts of things. Put it over to them.
Fantastic. Thanks, Claire. Megan, what's your bit of advice?
Well, I agree with all of that, but I'm going to say two things that have really helped me a lot is using multiple devices when I'm teaching online, and the use of OneNote Classroom. OneNote Classroom has been I've been able to see the students' work, as well as they're able to upload pictures and annotate pictures and do some really great things with that. So if I was to say one app, even though I don't really want to, I would say OneNote Classroom.
Thanks, Megan. Fantastic. And Craig?
Yeah, I think, less is more. There's so much great things, so many great things that you can do, that we've been throwing so many free tools that, you don't need to jump on all of them. Find what you're doing now and do it well. That innovation can come later. Those new things can come later. If you're ready to try new things, jump on something exciting and new like HelloGo World, which is all about augmented reality and create those learning experiences that are different and engaging, particularly if you're on Apple mobile devices. It's a really exciting one. I'll put the link in the chat as well. But, for 90% of us, the whole idea is let's use what we've got well first, and let's make sure that we're looking after each other.
Absolutely. Okay, that kind of ends our webinar today. There's a few things going on in the chat there, so feel free to stick around for a couple of minutes to look at the questions and the feedback that's coming on the. And I know Craig's put a couple of links in there. Thank you for doing that, Craig. But I would just like to say a massive thank you, and I do miss you all. Actually, it's really great to see you all, and I know we could have spoken for another hour at least on a lot of this, because I'd love to pick your brains more. I had so many questions here that I only got to ask a few of them, but there's so much I would love to have got out. But if there's any of the attendees that have got questions, they can contact Jigsaw. I can then feed back to Megan, Claire, Craig and Phill, and I'm sure they'd be willing to answer any questions that come out as a result of this. But from us at Jigsaw24, thank you so much, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And listen, you keep safe, and all of you and attendees, everybody keep well and keep safe, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.